Good afternoon, everyone. We are back to the to air meet, and we're happy that to see that the day has gone very productively. We've gone through the different concurrent sessions, great conversations, great new ideas, tips. We hope that you have been also learning a lot as we have throughout the day. And today right now we are in our main presentation, our keynote address, and by a very esteemed colleague, Matt Gold. Let me give you a quick bio reading of Matt's profile. Matt Gold is an associate professor of English and Digital Humanities at the Graduate Center, where he is advisor to the provost for digital initiatives. He's also director of the MA program in digital humanities and director of the MS program in data analysis and visualization. With Lauren Klein, he co-edits the Debates in the Digital Humanities book series from the University of Minnesota Press, and he currently serves as president of the Association for Computers and the Humanities, and also president of the constituent organization board of the Alliance of Digital Humanities organization. We're very happy and honored to have Matt joining us and offering this keynote presentation. And without further ado, welcome, Matt.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I'm incredibly honored to be here today and to be joining the conference, which I've been attending all day, and it's been fantastic to hear everyone's presentations. My title today is An Opportunity, Free Software, Data Privacy, and the People's University. Before I start, I want to pay tribute to the Lenape tribe, whose tribal elders, present and past, are connected to this land on which we gather, and also to acknowledge the painful history of deception, genocide, and forced removal of indigenous people from this territory. Significant parts of my talk today will center on the CUNY Academic Commons, and I want to dwell for a moment on the idea of a commons, of a commonwealth, of the things we share together, as opposed to the things that divide and enclose land, space, and knowledge around us. As the Fort Peck Sioux poet Louise Red Elk has written in her poem Game, tracks are all that define these voices, hungry lives pulsing sacred ground. We are a journey of distressed shapes, red essence on parchment, occupying a life. As we continue on this journey, let us attend to the tracks that we and others have left behind. I also want to acknowledge how painful the past year has been for so many communities, but especially for communities of color in the face of police brutality, voter suppression, white supremacy, and the effects of a pandemic in a country marked by rampant inequality, as we have seen especially in the Bronx. And may we work towards a more hopeful future together. I send my deepest thanks to Carlos Guevara and Kate Lyons and the organizers of the BronxEdTech Showcase for the invitation to speak at this event. My first experience as a college teacher occurred at Lehman College in 1997. And then, as now, my experience as a faculty member is informed by the amazing work being done on CUNY's Bronx campuses. I'm deeply honored to be speaking with you here today. And I also want to take a moment to thank an amazing set of CUNY colleagues with whom I've worked to create, share, and foster open source technology and open educational resources across the university. This list is incomplete. I'm terrified I've left people out, but everyone here and everyone who has been working for the cause of open education has been part of this work and is part of the entire presentation I'm going to give today. So I'm going to give a talk that's in about 4 parts. The first part is going to be an introduction. At 8:43 p.m. on August 24th, 2020, 5 months into the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic, Ian Linkletter, a learning technology specialist at the University of British Columbia, tweeted a link to an unlisted but publicly accessible YouTube video published by Proctorio, a company that sells exam proctoring software. Links to the videos have been shared by Proctorio itself on a website that provided support to instructors using the platform. Linkletter's university, the University of British Columbia, was using Proctorio, and Linkletter had grown angry that his university had spent money on software that was being used to surveil students while they took exams. In his tweets, he pointed out the dangers he saw in the software. And these are the quotes from his tweets. There are videos from Proctorio's instructors' help. I think it's important for us in our communities to know how this software functions so we can criticize it. I will keep sharing information, okay? And then he writes, this video from Proctorio's YouTube channel shows how the abnormal eye movement function works. This is the one that will show you, beyond a doubt, the emotional harm you are doing to students by using this technology. And then in another tweet, he wrote, this video from Proctorio's YouTube channel shows how the abnormal head movement function works. This is the one that will identify students with medical conditions that affect their head movement. They will get a higher suspicion level for it. So this software is used by faculty while students are taking exams, and it's meant to monitor them as they take those exams. Soon after Linkletter published these tweets, the YouTube videos to which he referred began to disappear from YouTube. Linkletter continued to criticize Proctorio in his tweets, arguing, quote, that Proctorio can't hide, we know their CEO, we know he's unethical, we know how the software works, we know it's the worst. And a few weeks later, Linkletter was informed that Proctorio was suing him for copyright infringement, claiming that by linking to Proctorio's own YouTube videos that it itself had published, he had distributed confidential material owned by the company. Needless to say, lawsuits are expensive, and as an educational technologist working at a university, Linkletter had few means to defend himself. He quickly depleted his entire savings and turned to a larger community of educational technologists to help him out. To date, he's raised $84,225 to aid him in these legal costs, but Proctorio's legal maneuverings, which have continued, have delayed trial dates and caused additional expenditures. Clearly, the company is attempting to bury this lone educational technologist in paperwork as it carries on a campaign of intimidation against him. And I want to say that I so admire Ian's courage in fighting these lawsuits, in defending himself here. Proctorio's legal assault on an educational technologist who dared raise concerns over unethical practices that, to be honest, are present in most test proctoring software should give us all concern. It speaks to multiple issues that I would like to address today. The spectacle of a large company suing an individual educational technologist for his critical tweets highlights so much of what is wrong about educational technology in the academy today. Among the obvious problems, EdTech is big business. Universities, including CUNY, spend millions of dollars on enterprise software such as Blackboard, Turnitin, Microsoft 365, and Respondus. Romanced by vendors who preach a gospel of technological solutionism, universities are increasingly turning to corporations to run the infrastructure of academic operations. The reasons offered for these investments, or used to justify them, involve economies of scale, better systems of support, and increased uniformity in the student experience. But the overall result is that many aspects of the faculty and student experience of university life has been outsourced to private companies. For-profit companies have one goal in mind: shareholder profit. And we have to keep that in mind as we use these products. Business is business, and it shouldn't surprise anyone that companies have that long goal in mind: increasing shareholder revenue. And we see what happens when well-meaning people like Ian Linkletter get in the way of that shareholder profit. Corporate EdTech indeed is built on an extractive surveillance model. Sometimes the software literally surveils students, as in the case of proctoring software such as Proctorio and Respondus. At other times, student content submitted through platforms like Turnitin is quite literally disenfranchised and monetized by the corporation. And in other cases, collective and depersonalized user data is used by companies to improve their own platforms with the goal of increasing user engagement. In her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power, Shoshana Zuboff defines surveillance capitalism as a process that, quote, unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. Zuboff describes this as a process of extraction. Platforms such as Google, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, quote, lure users into their extractive operations in which personal experiences are scraped and packaged as a means to others' ends. Zuboff argues that personalization is a crucial aspect of this mining operation. The platform shapes itself to our behaviors, but it also shapes our behaviors, encouraging more extraction. As a scholar, Eben Moglen has argued, we built media that consumed us as we consumed it. The smooth interfaces of these platforms are precisely calibrated to make us want to return again and again in an unceasing cycle of attention and personalization, a process in which we give our information freely to these systems, which turn them back towards us in the form of new targeted content, and of course, ads. But it is the particular landscape of EdTech, educational technology, that I want to talk about today. And I want to talk about it not just in terms of the concerns we should have, but also the means of resistance we can form. Because sadly, the university as a space is fully enmeshed in corporate capitalism. There's no outside of capital in the modern university. Indeed, capital is enmeshed in every aspect of modern university life, from the systems we use to register students and verify attendance, to the systems we use to teach our classes, to the platforms we use for our email. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has magnified this 1,000-fold, as vendors jumped at the opportunity. According to an article in The Conversation, American startup educational tech companies raised more than $2 billion in 2020, a 30% increase over 2019. According to that same article, and this is a quote, as one former CEO of a nonprofit tech company notes, tech companies' investments in kindergarten to grade 12 educational tech is not a big moneymaker, but it's a big branding opportunity. Tech companies profit in the long run when students and parents develop lifelong brand loyalty after particular platforms become entwined with students' lives. And we have to keep that in mind as our universities purchase these corporate platforms, that sometimes the reason we may be getting deals on them is that this is part of a branding exercise on the part of those companies. As the 2019 Spark Landscape Analysis pointed out, corporate academic publishers like Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, Clarivate, Pearson, McGraw-Hill, and Cengage are rapidly reconfiguring themselves as data analytics companies, offering a, quote, seamless provision of services that cater to multiple layers of the research and teaching process, and that promise field-level data analysis to universities in an attempt to influence institutional decision-making. Seen from this angle, students and even faculty begin to look more and more besieged by the commercial aims of proprietary ed tech, by the rapacious reach of corporate educational technology capital. And yet, here at CUNY, there is resistance to the work of surveillance capital. Here at CUNY, at the City University of New York, there are other models of educational technology, ones built on community values that do not embed the profit imperative at the heart of everything they do. And I'd like to spend the rest of my time today with you showcasing this important, this vital work, and explaining why I think CUNY finds itself at the precipice of an extraordinary opportunity to reshape the grounds of higher education. Here are some of the ways in which we've seen over the past few years surveillance tech be resisted at CUNY. First, Roxanne Shirazi, a librarian at the CUNY Graduate Center, led the creation of a statement and a declaration of data privacy principles that CUNY should keep in mind as it makes purchases of software. Secondly, we've seen student activism against and preventing and trying to advocate against the purchasing and use of data platforms that problematically violate student privacy. And these student-generated petitions have been influential in affecting the choices that CUNY as a system makes. And then third, there is testimony to the Board of Trustees in opposition to the resolution to approve a contract with Turnitin for plagiarism detection software led by Luke Walter, Lisa Rodi, and Roxanne Shirazi, which was impactful and gathered thousands of signatures in support and pointed out what Turnitin as a company does with the content that is submitted to it. And it's exactly that model of extractive surveillance technology that I described before. This work, all three of those efforts, I think, are part of the story. That kind of resistance, that kind of community gathering in support of our shared values and protection of our own privacy as faculty, as students, as community members of the university is crucial. But there's another aspect to this story, and that's one I want to focus on as well. And it's a model of software development that is in opposition to the corporate proprietary model. And it's called free software. Free software is a set of practices for the distributed collaboration and collaborative creation of software code that is then made openly and freely available. But it is much more. Free software, as Christopher Kelty describes in his work, 2 Bits, notes that free software exemplifies a considerable reorientation of knowledge and power in contemporary society. A reorientation of power with respect to the creation, dissemination, and authorization of knowledge in the era of the internet. The knowledge commons is part of this work. Free software helps create or can help create a knowledge commons, which has been described by the scholar Eleanor Ostrom as, she writes, knowledge is a shared resource, a complex ecosystem that is a commons, a resource shared by a group of people that is subject to social dilemmas. And what she means by this is that often in the past, a commons was thought of quite literally often as a piece of land, and the enclosure movement, which divided up common pool resources into individual tracts of land owned by individual people. There's an analogous system that happens with knowledge. And as Ostrom points out, when knowledge becomes a shared resource, the second part of it, it's subject to social dilemmas. That's not necessarily a good. It's subject to social actions. And so it's up to those of us participating in the knowledge commons to protect that commons itself and ensure that it is used for good means, good ends. So there's much to recommend open education. And among the things that I'd like to point out that are part and parcel of free software especially are flexibility, first of all. When one is working with free software, what happens is that one gets the source code. You don't just get the end product. You can jump into the guts of the software itself and make changes, which means that you can design it and redesign it and make changes to it in response to users, rather than, say, waiting for a company to make changes that the decisions it makes, yes, may be made to improve the platform, but also may be made for other reasons. When one works in free software, one is working within a larger community. Much of my own work has been done in the area of WordPress. WordPress has an incredibly large community of users. Estimates say that 41% of the internet is powered by WordPress sites. And there's an incredible array of developers, community members, creating new plugins, new themes, new ways to customize the software. And when one uses free software, one enters into that collective work. And that leads to innovation. That leads to a kind of rapid adjustment of the software. It leads to more experimentation, more on-the-fly work, which I think is something that most of us want when we're working with educational software. We want to be able to take advantage of new technologies. Importantly, though, there's also transparency in the workings of free software. The software code is shared. One can see what the code does and what it's about. And that kind of transparency is precisely what's hidden in these larger corporate models. Free software is more likely, not always, but is more likely to be able to embed ethical perspectives within it. And that's because it is co-created with the people using the software. And finally, when a university makes an investment in free software, it is not purchasing a license, it is not purchasing a product, it is paying people. It is paying people who work at the university. It is supporting its community members, and this is key. I don't want to pretend that there are no problems with open, and I'll talk about a couple of these briefly. Free software, there are many issues of labor. Who is doing the work of open? Who is paying for the work of open? We are very lucky at CUNY that the work that CUNY has contributed to in the free software movement, we have paid our developers. But there are plenty of cases in which people are contributing to larger projects without being paid, and that is problematic. There are also issues of privilege. There are long-standing critiques, for instance, of Wikipedia and the gender breakdowns of editors. Some of those have begun to be ameliorated, but it's still a problem. One can't assume that beginning to use free software or open source software obviates larger societal problems. They're all still part of the same world. They're just sometimes more transparent, I would say. There are also issues of sustainability. And I think this is one of the reasons why decision makers at universities fear using free software. They want to be able to depend on a company that will provide a new version of the software. They don't want to have to depend upon a community, which sounds a little strange, like it might not happen, who knows? And so there are concerns always about the sustainability of free software, also because it generates less capital than corporate platforms. So its sustainability is always at risk. And finally, I want to bring up the topic of design. I think that our free software projects at CUNY are incredibly well designed. Those of us in the projects that I'll show you in a little bit pay a great deal of attention to design. But I also want to say that when one compares free software projects to some technology platforms like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, those software platforms, as I said earlier, they're engineered for engagement, millions of dollars paid on design and interface that the free software movement has a hard time matching. So one of the trade-offs sometimes in using free software is that its operations are not quite as smooth as those of the corporate platforms. I believe that those trade-offs are worth making because the price that we wind up paying for those larger corporate platforms is the price of data privacy. Finally, recursive publics is a concept that was developed by Christopher Kelty, a scholar at UCLA, who wrote that recursive publics are publics concerned with the ability to build, control, modify, and maintain the infrastructure that allows them to come into being in the first place, and which, in turn, constitutes their everyday practical commitments and the identities of the participants as creative and autonomous individuals. And this is hugely important, that on these free software platforms, the users, the people using the platform, are given freedoms and the kinds of abilities to do things that they don't often get a chance to do on other university platforms. And I think that's that ideal of a platform that is responsive to the group of people using it is key to free software. Another term I'd just like to mention is community-owned infrastructure. This has been an increasing movement within open educational technology circles. The idea is that the infrastructure that we use for academic work does not have to be bought and sold, but actually can be made by institutions working together. So why does this matter? Why does this matter for CUNY? Well, it matters because we are the people's university. The City University of New York, whose charter says that CUNY, the City University of New York, will serve the children of the whole people of the city. Openness is in our blood. It's in our identity. It's part of our mission. It's part and parcel of who we are. It's what we do. And that is why I think we have to commit to free software and open source software as a university system. And that brings me to the next portion of my talk, to describe some of the amazing work that has been going on at CUNY in this area of free software. The first project I want to mention is the CUNY Academic Commons. It was created in 2009 through the leadership of George Oddie, who was then leading the CUNY Committee on Academic Technology. And the CUNY Academic Commons was the first deliverable of that committee. The committee is a university-wide committee with 2 representatives from each campus. And through George's vision, we were able to create this system, this platform built on WordPress and BuddyPress that is now used across CUNY for teaching, for research, for service, for committees. The Commons has seen investment in recent years from the CUNY Office of Library Services, and I want to thank Ann Fidler, Andy McKinney, and Bob Maruca for their strong support of the CUNY Academic Commons. And point out, too, that the Commons is hosted by the CUNY Graduate Center as a resource for the entire system. The Commons is faculty-led, it's open source, it changes. We do 2 releases a year, and we're always adding new things. We're responding to our members. And importantly, we serve a wider public. The CUNY Academic Commons from the beginning has taken care to release the WordPress plugins we create to the wider community. And because we have amazing developers working with us, 2 of whom are on the WordPress core team, the code that has been developed for the Commons has reached an estimated millions of users. The Commons budget, as I mentioned earlier, open source projects their funding goes to people. And 98% of the Commons budget goes to pay our part-time employees and developers. The Commons has played an incredible role during the pandemic. in recent years, over the last 2 or 3 years, when the Commons was first created, we did not allow undergraduate courses to be taught on the Commons. We were worried. We had a part-time team of 3 people working 6 to 8 hours a week doing support. And we thought, how can we open up the Commons to 250,000 CUNY undergrads? But after a number of years, we grew tired of saying no to faculty who wanted to teach on the Commons. And so through a great partnership, and I want to call out especially Luke Walser for his leadership on this score, we really began to embrace teaching and to think through what it would mean to have faculty teach on the Commons. And it's been an incredible success. Since January 2019, over 1,250 courses have been taught on the Commons. Membership has tripled over that time from not just over 9,000 in January 2018 to just under 30,000 today. And 23 of the 25 CUNY colleges had courses taught on the Commons from January 2020 to May 2021. These courses ran the gamut from the humanities, social sciences, STEM disciplines, and professional courses. Additionally, teaching and learning centers have used the Commons extensively to share best practices for teaching and learning during the pandemic, including considerations for instructional continuity, which was created by the GC's Teaching and Learning Center, the John Jay Teaching and Learning Center, Teaching Resources Site, the SPS Faculty Community Site, the Hunter College Academic Center for Excellence in Research and Teaching, the BMCC Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship, GC Online, and GC Teaching and Learning Center. And the Commons has also been used, and what I'm showing you right now are some screenshots from the Commons. These are examples of courses that have been taught on the Commons and groups. And the Commons has also been used on important university-wide initiatives, such as the Mellon-sponsored Transformative Learning in the Humanities project, led by Kathy Davidson and Shelley Eversley. Additional examples span the research, teaching, and service missions of the university. Another project that has made a real impact over the past couple of years is Manifold Scholarship. Manifold is a digital publishing platform. It's located at cuny.manifoldapp.org. It is a collaboration between the CUNY Graduate Center, the University of Minnesota Press, and Cast Iron Coding. And the perspectives of the Digital Humanities Center, a University Press. Sorry, my earphones made a loud sound. Have really come together to create this project. And it's being used in all sorts of ways across the campuses. Manifold is accessible and it is responsive. It can be used just as easily on a phone as it can on a laptop. It is being used to publish an enormous range of OER resources. And again, I want to thank the CUNY Office of Library Services for its support. We've seen examples like the Queensborough Community College Great Books for Composition courses, a course on Community College edition of Benito Cereno that saw faculty from Hostos Community College and LaGuardia Community College collaborating with their students to comment on and read Benito Cereno together. We've seen different kinds of projects created, some projects where people are going into the archives and publishing archival work. We've seen faculty using reading groups to read books together with their students. And we've also seen Manifold used as the endpoint, the destination for student writing. And two examples of that are this wonderful project, My Slipper Floated Away, which was at Lehman College, and We Eat, a student-centered cookbook, which began through a course at the CUNY Graduate Center. We've also been expanding our collections. Robin Miller, an open educational technologist at CUNY Graduate Center, has been working on Libros en Español, which has been used extensively at Lehman College. And one of the things we're really trying to do here is to address the overwhelming whiteness of the canon of open educational resources, and to try to create more open educational resources and a more diverse set of languages and by a more diverse set of authors. We've also seen incredible resources created like Stacy Katz's OER Starter Kit workbook. But Manifold is a different system, a different platform. There are other examples across the CUNY system of community platforms that are bringing together students and faculty at the campuses. I want to start with the OpenLab at City Tech, which began with a grant from the US Department of Education for Hispanic serving institutions. And the OpenLab has blossomed into an incredible site that has faculty teaching courses, committees, the provost using it, students using it for portfolios, students using it for clubs. And what it really does, what all of these sites do is they make visible the intellectual tissue of the university. They demonstrate openly what CUNY is, what it can be, who we are, what it looks like when we work together, when we do our work in the open. Blogs at Baruch. There's a whole set of platforms out there. Blogs at Baruch, a WordPress multi-site platform at Baruch has done incredible work for years, sharing courses, especially in first year writing courses, and is used extensively at Baruch for both courses and for publications and committees. There's the ePortfolios at Macaulay WordPress system, which is used by students there to share their ePortfolios, and tremendously innovative work thinking about what an ePortfolio can be being done at Macaulay. There's Q Writing at Queens College, used for composition courses. There is the Hostos Social Network, which all of us have experienced today, which is being used at Hostos to bring together groups of students and faculty to work together, and which hosts the beautiful BronxEdTech website that you saw today. Then, in addition to all these platforms, what the Commons team has done is to create something called the Commons in a Box. Through a grant from the Sloan Foundation, we were able to abstract the features of the CUNY Academic Commons and to make them publicly available so that other institutions could use them. And in recent years, we received an NEH grant that allowed the CUNY Academic Commons team to collaborate with the City Tech OpenLab team to create a second version of the Commons in a Box called the C-Box OpenLab. And that is now being used by the Borough of Manhattan Community College to share courses, to bring people together, to produce open educational resources. And it really shows what can happen when you start these projects at one place and build them out, and then other campuses start to gain momentum and to come together. I think the BMCC OpenLab is one of the most exciting developments in recent years, because for so long we had all these individual projects going, and through this collaboration with City Tech and the CUNY Academic Commons, we've been able to create a system that others can use and to start to see it being used across CUNY. I also want to highlight among these projects, all these wonderful open projects, Vocat, which was a project started at Baruch by Luke Walter and Mikhail Gershovich, and is now being carried on by Allison Lear-Samuels in connection with cast iron coding. Vocat allows students and faculty to evaluate videos, images, audio, and it's a system that allows students to submit videos for faculty to give feedback, and it's an open source system. None of this, or much of this, would not have been possible without the investments made in recent years by the CUNY Office of Library Services and by our librarians across the system, who have been promoting, supporting, building open educational resources on their own and with faculty and students. it's impossible in some ways to overstate the importance of this work and the importance of the funding it's provided, the support it's provided. It is funding that comes from New York State with the goal of reducing textbook costs for students. And if you can imagine what it would be like to be a student at CUNY and not to have to pay for books, you begin to see some of the process of open educational resources. But if you take a step beyond that and you think, okay, well, now what can we do when we not only are using openly licensed books or zero cost textbooks, but we're actually collaborating together and demonstrating our learning for the public, you begin to see a vision of a university as it could be, as it really embraces openness. And that brings me to the close of my talk, which I want to kind of open outwards and to ask you all to think about the incredible open opportunity we have ahead of us. This website, this blog was one of the earliest blogs on the CUNY Academic Commons, and it's one I've always held dear to my heart. It's called Hell Driver's Pit Stop. Its run has kind of ended for now, but it was created by Craig Bernardini at Hostos Community College in the English department. And I have to say, as the director of the CUNY Academic Commons, looking to see what will people do on this site, seeing a blog pop up called Hell Driver's Pit Stop with Black Sabbath on the front page gave me so much delight, especially when I started reading it and seeing Craig's thoughts about music, all kinds of music, not just metal, classical music, everything. Just use a faculty member at CUNY using his blog, using Hell Driver's Pit Stop as a resting place for his writing, as a way to communicate to the world. I think that this blog really demonstrates what's so powerful about installations like the Commons and like all the other sites I've shown you. We don't know when we create these spaces what people will do with them. We ask our users, what will you build? What will you create in this space? And that creativity is at the heart, that openness is at the heart of what we do. It's at the heart of the open education movement. And this is a blog post by Jim Groom, educational technologist with CUNY roots, who I met at grad school at the Grad Center in 1997, who began working at CUNY colleges as a teacher, became an educational technologist through the Macaulay ITF program, and went on to the University of Mary Washington, where he became one of the foremost educational technologists, I would say really in the world today. And Jim eventually left that position to create Reclaim Hosting, which offers low-cost hosting to educational institutions. But Jim wrote this post, I bleed CUNY blood, after coming to CUNY for a talk. I think it was about, I can't read the date anymore, it's 2011 or so. But I've always thought of this post as an anthem. It's not just a blog post, it's not just a piece of writing, it's an anthem. And what it's an anthem about is about harnessing the power of CUNY, of looking at the 25 campuses of CUNY, our hundreds of thousands of students, our thousands of faculty, and asking what might be possible if we work together in the open, if we pull together and share our work openly. What kinds of creative expression might we be able to see? And I want to argue today that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to bring together that collection of open platforms that I shared with you, that open infrastructure. It's the envy of so many around us. A bunch of us at CUNY were presenting recently at the OER by Domains conference. So many people in the comments said, you all are so lucky to have this kind of support at CUNY, and we are. But we could do so much more. We could do so much more. We could do it not in service of vendors, but of self-determined creation, of self-actualization. We can see students taking control of the means of production. It's the opposite of surveillance capitalism. These platforms embed an ethical view into their groundwork. They are built not to surveil. They are a vision of the internet as a space for exploration and growth, a vision of the internet, I would say, that's modeled on the ideals of the CUNY system itself, of what it represents as the people's university, what it has the promise to be. That, I think, is the path we have before us, and it's one that we collectively could choose if we have the courage to choose it. Thank you so much.
Well, as Matt, you could see the reactions from the audience. We love this feature of the emojis. They're making it look present, and then all of the applause and signs of love for the presentation. We were very, again, honored and happy to have you in as our keynote speaker for today's conference. And I'm going to be opening for questions. Anybody that has a question, you could either put it in the chat. You could use the questions feature or just put it in the chat. Or you could also raise your hand, and then we'll bring you to the stage so that you can ask your question. The raise hand, the feature is to your right side, right to next to the chat. You're going to see right above the attendees, you're going to see the raise hand feature. Any questions from anybody? Don't be shy. Okay, let's give a couple of seconds on
yeah,
that.
I mean, while we're waiting for questions, I appreciate the kind words, and I just want to say that all of this work, I think the best thing about it is that it is collaborative work, that it's work we do together, and also that enable us to come together to talk about that collaboration. So really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Matt. And it's from the comments and from the reaction, we see that everybody felt inspired, and there's a lot of power on the work that everybody at CUNY does, and we've seen a lot of buckets of innovation. How can we push that to the next levels? That will be our mission to continue to leverage in these conversations. I want to thank again Matt Gold for the presentation and for bringing these conversations and keeping this in your minds. Don't let it stay here. Just continue having those conversations. Continue pushing. I'm feeling proud of all of the work that is happening throughout CUNY. Thanks again, Matt, for joining us today.
My pleasure. And can I just first I'll say hello, Elizabeth. Wow. And Laura, to answer your question, do we have a central clearinghouse that links to the software? I would say two things about that. One, Chris Stein at BMCC is building out a document that I think will soon be shared widely with kind of like a directory of all of these projects. And this is also through the aegis of the CUNY Committee on Academic Technology. I will also say that over time, the CUNY Academic Commons subcommittee has become a space where a lot of people who are interested in open software and free software have been working together. And I would invite anyone to get in touch if you're interested in joining that group. And maybe following this page, I'll publish my slides and also share links to all of these great projects.
Okay, there is one more question. How do you see students getting involved in joining the effort?
So Jody's question, how do you see students getting involved? Well, I mean, one of the things that has really happened over the last year is that, on the Commons especially, we've seen something like 6,000 or 7,000 students join over the past year. For the most part, those students have been there for the classes that they've taken. But there's a potential for so much more. And I think we've seen some students take up that potential in terms of creating portfolios for themselves, starting blogs, using the Commons to share their work. But I think there are other opportunities ahead, everything from involving CUNY students in the work of building these software platforms, which I do think is useful for CUNY students to do, because there are many jobs out there that involve building open source and free software, but also to just create and share content. And that's been one of the things that's been really wonderful to see in spaces like Manifold, where what we imagined being published were books, open educational textbooks, open access textbooks. But one of the things that's been most exciting to see is what students have contributed to it. So I think both on the part of faculty inviting their students into that process, and also on the platforms opening up opportunities, it's definitely a space to build.
I concur, and I think, bringing the work the students are doing in the class and how that could go beyond just the class, that would be a great way. I don't see any more questions. I'm going to ask everybody to join me in thanking Matt again for the wonderful presentation. You can show your emojis in here, and then this is going to, I guess, a continuous collaboration, and we're sure that we're going to be continuing working with you, Matt, in some projects in the near future. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you everyone for attending.
Great.